Hello, and welcome to a Human Perspective podcast. I'm Lola Oguntoken. On this podcast, I share very human thoughts and perspectives on a range of people-related topics. I also frequently chop it up with guests who share their own perspectives. Now, I can't promise everything you hear on this podcast will always be right, but I can promise to always give you a human perspective. Let's go. On this episode of A Human Perspective, I have two of my very close friends, Marla and Kemi. Kemi is Director of Finance for a leading UK aviation company. Marla is a commercial director within a major US bank. Both have successful careers, they have built and grown teams, and they've always had jobs that required them to remain hands-on as well as perform at a very high level. I met Marla, I think after university, and Kemi I've known since I was around 13. So we've known each other for at least, 20 years minimum in general?
No, me and you,
Yeah.
like around close to
Yeah,
30.
let's not give away our age because we're only
Yeah,
25.
okay. Keep that
So,
vague. Keep
yeah.
that vague. It's the accountant in me, you know.
Yeah.
I'll get that right.
A good place to start, as usual, is for you both to introduce yourselves. So, Marla, do you want to go first?
Firstly, thanks for having me on the podcast. I've been waiting to get an invite for quite a while. So
Only taken a couple of years.
Yeah, thanks, Lola. So my background, my career history, I'm one of those people that didn't really know what she wanted to do. Went through school life, university life, just working through the milestones as everyone sets out to do, but not really having that plan. And I went to university with Kemi. Kemi knew what she wanted to do the whole way through. So it was it was quite distracting for me because I was like, I don't know what I want to do. Anyway, ended up in banking, have been in banking the whole time, but have been in different roles in banking, primarily in real estate. Bringing it back to the topic of this podcast, it's really interesting because the sector that I work in is very dominated by people that don't look like me or come from a background like I do. So it's been quite an interesting challenge because sometimes that imposter syndrome really does play quite well when you're thinking about how different you are to other people and how the other people are very successful versus the path that you've chosen. It can we'll go into in more detail, I'm sure, but it's been interesting.
Kemi?
Okay. Thanks for having me on as well. My podcast debut. Very, very, very exciting. I started my career in one of the big four, training as an accountant, and left as soon as I could, really. The earliest opportunity. So then spent about 4 years with the big four and then moved into industry. And since then have worked in a mix of sectors, but mainly in aviation at different points in time, and currently, back in aviation.
Brilliant. Our topic for today is imposter syndrome. We've all experienced imposter syndrome at some point in time, probably still experiencing it today. And we've really been talking about this in one way or another, one shape or form throughout our careers, I feel like. It's always been a topic, but I don't think we had a term for it until maybe the last couple of years. And I think as we become more experienced, that feeling has grown. I don't know what you think, but we're going to explore imposter syndrome, the concept of imposter syndrome on this week's episode. So, first question is, what is imposter syndrome to you?
For me, it's that feeling of not being good enough and that constant comparison. It's that feeling when you're constantly comparing yourself to others and thinking, I don't perform my job as well as they do. Why am I in this role? And actually it's come more to the mind recently because of some things I've had to do. And I think you kind of touched upon it. It seems to have in my career grown over time. I don't think I even thought about it at all in the early years of my career. So that's what it is to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's yeah, very similar. I think it's the narrative in your head. I'm too critical of myself, probably driven by imposter syndrome. Um, I always describe it like it's feeling as if you're going to get found out. At some point somebody's gonna realize like, oh no, she's not actually supposed to be in this position. Oh no, what's she doing? It's like that feeling of, oh, somebody's going to find me out, and that's going to be the end of it. That's kind of how it really manifests itself.
Or they've already found out and they're just not saying it out loud.
God.
Yeah, I think for me, it's probably been a little bit different because I've walked a very different path from the both of you, where you've kind of always had something, it's been like finance related. And I feel like that career path is actually quite like it's quite set, so you have an understanding of where you're going. Whereas I feel like I've been kind of beating down a path for myself with my career. So I've always been very confident about what I can do and the impact that I can make. The difference for me is I haven't really sought promotions. I don't know why, and I'm not saying this is a good thing actually, but I've just always believed in I just want to do good work. And then I did start to get frustrated that it wasn't leading to promotions automatically, but they then did start to come. And I think once you do then get into those positions, it feels like the game changes and it's no longer about what you do and how well you do it, but what you're perceived to be doing and how well you're perceived to be doing that. And it's about the people who are making those judgments. So it's really difficult to feel safe when you are in a senior role or a leadership role or a role where more junior people look towards you, because you probably by nature know what you're supposed to be doing, but is that what whoever they are, like more senior management or whoever it is, do they see that as well? And so that's where imposter syndrome for me starts to really show up, in that I just feel like, I know you've put me here, but I don't think you actually want me here. I don't actually think I'm what you envision. And so everything I do is going to be wrong because I don't look like who you believe should actually be sitting here. And that is pretty traumatic and triggering in so many ways. And sometimes you're reading into situations rightly or wrongly, and it's just an uncomfortable place to be in. So that's personally what it looks like for me.
Isn't it interesting that, as a side note, that outside versus inside? Because on the outside, and we know you to be confident, you know what you want, you've got drive, but on the inside, you're feeling something else. And it's just that, I don't know, we've all got it, but isn't it so interesting how those two pieces, the confidence versus the imposter syndrome, are kind of banging against one another and you just don't see it?
The two things exist at the same time. The imposter syndrome is very internal, and you may not actually give out that impression to people. You can give an impression of being confident and on top of what you're doing, but you still have that voice inside that's impacted by both what you're feeling inside, but also external factors as well, because there are different layers to it. That, people always talk about imposter syndrome as being a more of a female thing, which is probably another another discussion point. But then you
Yeah.
layer on that,
Mm.
other factors of, ethnicity, of class, like Marla touched
Mm.
on earlier, like social background. That then adds extra layers to imposter syndrome that can make it harder to overcome. You have to really acknowledge it and how it's affecting you for the reasons that it affects you, because people always just jump to the fact that it's just because you're a woman, but actually there are other layers to imposter syndrome that you have to deal with as well.
And I think men do get it as well. I've got
They
friends
do.
that get it. And
Yeah.
sometimes I just don't think they want to be vocal about it. I just don't think they want to say they've got it. A very good friend of mine recently told me that he feels that way. So I think that, again, there's a gender piece to it, just on the very basics of women are a bit more open, generally speaking.
I think the difference between male and female experiences when it comes to imposter syndrome and then those additional layers of, background, ethnicity, etc. It's not that I don't think men don't experience imposter syndrome. I just feel they're not as uncomfortable as we are. Because when they look around the room, they see other people like them with the same level of intelligence, same way, same communication styles. You're seeing yourself everywhere you look. So there is some comfort in that. Yes, you'll have the natural, am I actually doing okay? That's what we should all be asking ourselves anyway. But I
Mm.
struggle to believe that they are experiencing it to the severity that we are when we are the only. It's the same thing, but two very different experiences of the workplace. And again, perceptions of what they do versus what we do, etc.
I agree, like, completely. If you take a step back and think of the word imposter and its link with women, that's intentional because when women started to enter the workplace and started to move up the managerial levels, they would have been seen as imposters. So actually, it wasn't just something that's in in women's head. It actually was a reality. You were seen as, well, why are you here? And why are,
Mm.
especially, and it's hard for us now, but, think 20, 30 years ago, for those women that were, working their way up the ladder, it would have been even more difficult. So they were really seen as imposters, like you were not meant to be there. And now it is now attached more to women and how we feel in the workplace, because there is still that element of, as a woman, and then let's layer on the ethnicity part of it as well, but let's just talk about, as a woman, the reality is that you do have to prove your right to be in the senior positions more so than your male counterparts. Probably when we're younger and when we're kind of in our earlier stages of our career, we saw it, but maybe it just didn't land as much and we just didn't take it in and think about it. But the further up you go, you definitely experience that and you see it with other women as well, that you do have to do more just to prove why you're in the position that you're in, generally, compared to your male counterparts. So there's an element of imposter syndrome that's real. It's not all in the mind, but I think it's, what do we do with it? It's like self-fulfilling. If you
Mm.
if you label it too much, you can take it on too much, whereas actually you want to be thinking about, well, how do I get out of that space of feeling like that, even though it's real. I don't know if that makes
Mm.
sense,
Yeah,
because we often talk about imposter syndrome as being all in the mind, but it's actually not. It's driven by very real experiences that we all go through at work.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's another dynamic that's developing at the moment as well, because so many organizations are focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and are now focusing on not necessarily quotas, but helping people in the workplace, right? Helping talent progress in the workplace. So the new layer that's coming out is, did I get this job because I'm a woman or because I come from an ethnic background, rather than I'm actually good enough to do this job? And that's been emerging for a while. And I don't know what the answer to that really is, but it just adds another layer for that imposter syndrome to brew.
Yeah, and it's a valid, like, it's a valid thought. I'm sure I've thought that. I'm sure we've all thought that. But then
absolutely.
I counter it in my own head and say, do you know what? How many men are in positions, have got to positions because, maybe they got on with somebody, or they were from the right background, or not necessarily because they were the best person for the job. There is no way that you can stand up and say that every senior male person has got there because they were the best. That's just not the case. And so they've been given some type of advantage. So even if there is an element of somebody giving you an opportunity because you're a woman, you know what? Take it and run with it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and don't see everybody else as having got there purely because of merit, because I just don't
Mm.
believe in that, like, across the
It's
board.
mostly not the
It's
case, to
mostly
be
not the
honest.
case.
Do you feel that imposter syndrome has held you back or held your career back in some way? Or how has it shown up in your career? Maybe is the better question.
For me, it comes in waves. Like, it's not always there. It comes at certain points. Maybe if I'm, like, working on something that's really kind of a bit difficult, high pressure, like stakes are high, that it starts to creep in then, where I think, oh God, like, this is it. This is the time when I get found out. Or there are those moments where I've made a change, like moved on to a next role or to a different company, and usually it's come with a step up in position. Although to date, I don't think it's held me back because I've always just gone for it anyway. I do look at all the things, I think of all the things that I think I can't do first. Like, that's what's always in my mind. It's like, oh no, I can't do that. So maybe I shouldn't go for that job. Or, I can't do this, which is funnily where I think recruiters can be very helpful. Because if you're just looking at it on your own in isolation, sometimes you need that person to say, actually, no, you can do this, go for it. You've got enough experience. But I think more recently, it could have the potential to hold me back, because I feel like as you progress and the stakes get higher and the responsibility becomes more, you really start to question whether or not you can do it. So yeah, that's kind of
Mm,
how I've experienced it.
I agree. I mean, I don't think I could pinpoint any particular time in my career where it's held me back, but I'm sure it has. I think I totally think it has, but I can't pinpoint it. Actually, is as I was kind of preparing to talk to you today that I was thinking about this in more detail. I don't think I've ever really thought about this in this level of detail before. But then I started to think back on my career, and I got promoted really early on in my career, like really early compared to others. I at the time just thought, oh well, that's because of this situation was happening, so they had to promote me. Then I used that excuse or something else at another point in my career. So actually, now starting to think about it, it probably already was in my mind, because I was saying, oh, I only got the role because
Yeah.
of this, or I only got
So
the promotion
minimizing your
because of that.
achievements. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
where it starts to brew. But as I was saying to you a few weeks ago, I'm going through a process at the moment where I'm having to explain my achievements and really describe my impact. And that was a major, major point of imposter syndrome,
Mm.
because I was having to actually download everything from my brain and my experiences, my achievements, and thinking, no, I didn't do this. Surely I didn't do this. And when you put it on paper, that's even worse. It really does like bring it home. But I mean, as I said, I can't pinpoint it, but I'm sure it has.
Yeah. I think for me personally, even though I've said, look, I haven't really ever been too fussed about promotions, etc., I'm even thinking that that is imposter syndrome. The fact that you don't even try to dream of anything bigger. Why not? Why not even consider that? That's strange, especially for someone with my personality type. I think it's really strange. So I think it probably has always been there, just not recognizable. And quite often you're just grateful for the opportunity. Most of the time, you're just grateful to be present, grateful to have some kind of seat at the table.
Grateful. That
Yeah,
word.
exactly. And
Yeah.
that's the reason why. And I think there's this other piece as well where, as children of immigrants, and I think we've all had this kind of similar upbringing in that despite our backgrounds. So, okay, yes, we know people are going to judge you. You know, I've been told people are going to judge you because you're Black. They're going to think this, they're going to think that. You can't afford to think about that. All you need to do is just focus on your goal and just make sure you do good work and just make sure you're the best. That's it. Like, that's the seed that has been planted in my head. If you're the best, and there's no way that they can deny you. And that's how I feel about the two of you in terms of the positions that you're in today. Even if, as Kemi mentioned, there's this chance that, you know, your backgrounds had something to do with it, you were probably 10 times better than a lot of other people that they saw. You're not just a bum on a seat. You do make an impact, and both your roles require you to be able to achieve things, to get really big, important, complex things done. You can't just be a symbol and do that.
Yeah. Actually, if you think about it even in a different way, if you weren't good at your job, like you would know about it. You
Yeah.
would not have
Mm.
been, you
Mm.
wouldn't be given the leeway.
100. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's almost like actually, no, I not that you need that reason to kind of, but we do need to remind ourselves, actually, yeah, if you weren't good at your job, you wouldn't be given leeway. You
Yeah.
would you would
Yeah.
know about it and you would be
Very
replaced.
true.
And
You'd be
Yeah.
out very quickly.
yeah, you'd be out very quickly. So that's another side to it. There are so many different ways of seeing things. But Lola, to your point though about how you almost didn't allow yourself to think about promotion, or you almost
Yeah.
like subconsciously were kind of limiting
Yeah.
yourself in a way
Yeah.
for a period of time.
Yeah.
It's impacted by what you see. If we're not seeing not just senior women, senior Black women, senior Asian women, if we're not seeing that around us, that makes it very difficult to visualize, and aim for more. And I think we often talk about it quite flippantly, like if you can't see it, then how can you be it? But actually, it does have such a big impact if you're not seeing those executive women who are Black or who are Asian, who are from a minority background, then it that adds another layer and makes it even harder. Either you have to really, dig deep and push yourself to just go for it, whatever, or you need good people around you,
Mm-hmm.
that either maybe your manager or maybe a mentor or somebody that can actually see it and push you. And I think I've been lucky where I've had some not good managers, but I've had along the
Haven't we all?
way, haven't we all? But along the way, I have had some really good ones, and I have had some ones that have actually given me the outside perspective that you are actually really good, and actually. I would never think that myself, because to your point, Lola, I just think, well, I'm doing what everybody is doing.
Mm.
Surely everybody works hard, and surely, but obviously, yeah,
Mm-mm.
the
Mm-mm.
older you get, the more you realize that that's not the case. Not everybody works hard and cares and all of that stuff. But when we're
Yeah.
younger,
No.
you just think that's normal because that's what our parents expected of us,
That
and
was the bar. Like
that
that's
was the
that's
bar.
that's the
Yeah,
minimum. That's
yeah,
yeah, and
yeah,
everything you do should be exceptional.
yeah,
Let's flip this for a sec,
Yeah.
because we were talking about how whether, are we good enough to do the jobs? Are we as good as other people to do the jobs? But what if we're the role models? You talked
Mm,
about seeing the role models around you. What if we're the role models? So
yeah,
mm.
we're bringing something else to the role because we're
yeah.
role modeling for
We're
other
the
people
ones.
and future
Yeah,
leaders as well.
yeah,
So
Yeah.
it's a bit
yeah.
more than just whether we're doing a job. We've got another layer of something that we're bringing to the job, which is that role model
Mm,
piece.
yeah,
Absolutely.
definitely.
Yeah. It's not just important to see people, I think. I think it's also important that you're seeing authenticity. One of the reasons why it's difficult, or it can be difficult for people of ethnic minority backgrounds to get into or a seat at these tables, is because, quite frankly, we don't speak the same language. Sometimes just the way that we communicate, the message lands differently for whatever reason. You can say the same thing as someone who is expected to be sitting at the table, and for whatever reason, that is heard and you are not. there also just needs to be a little bit more openness to what good is. And I think there needs to be a little bit more focus on results, not just how I said something in a meeting. That's not where the real work is. That's all just semantics, it's politics, it's smoke and mirrors. There needs to be a culture shift in order to give more people the opportunity to show what they can do. And to be honest, when it comes to the imposter syndrome for me, it's not that I don't think I can do it, because even if I've never done it before, I'm curious and stubborn enough to get it done. It's that I feel that whatever I do in comparison to this person sitting next to me, it can be better, but it won't be valued as much. So in that sense, how much of this is actually about us versus work in general? So, work environments in general, just because of the way that they have been historically. There are a lot of traditions there that we probably don't even fully notice because it's just the norm. But actually, maybe that is what is creating that uncomfortability. So, in that sense, how real is imposter syndrome? Is it that we're not fitting in? If that's the case, then what does that mean? Because what does fitting in look like?
Yeah.
Then is it imposter syndrome, or is it that,
Everybody else
We're
has got a
just
problem.
different.
That
yeah,
you're not
like
making space. You're not
actually
making
you're
space
not making
for.
room for something that is different?
Yeah.
And it's not even that different. It's just not, the delivery is different, or the aura is different, or whatever. Like, and that's where true diversity lies. It's not just by putting
Mhm.
people at a table that come from different backgrounds. It's really about giving difference room
Giving
to
space to
breathe and
people.
flourish. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, of course. I think everybody has insecurities about their roles, their jobs, how well they're doing. I think that's normal. We can call that imposter syndrome. But when we're looking at the solid examples of imposter syndrome, I do wonder whether it's truly about the person being in their heads, as Kemi mentioned before. How much of this is actually in our heads versus not feeling free enough. Like, do you feel you can make a mistake?
Uh, no. I do. It's not that I don't. I do make mistakes, but I overplay them. I get really stressed about them, and nobody else cares. I think actually you're bang on, because for me anyway, my imposter syndrome. Even though I do have that, oh, I'm going to get found out. If I do something wrong, the whole world is over. But actually, a lot of it is, do I see myself interacting with really senior board members, shareholders, even though I do interact with them,
Yeah.
but it's not in the way that I see other people interacting. Like,
Yes.
so if I go way back to when I first started working, Big Four environment, that for me was like a complete game changer, eye opener. Like, I was, merrily going through school, university. You just don't really think about background, really. You will just get on. You will have a
Well, you
laugh.
surround
Like,
yourselves with people that you want to surround yourselves with,
yeah,
and
you just
then you're put in a
gravitate to.
workplace and
Yeah,
you haven't got a choice.
exactly. And then all of a sudden, joining one of the Big Four, I was just like, wow, okay, this is actually people that have privilege, right? These are people that all went to private school. They all, some are here and some are there, and
Mm.
gap year this and gap year
Mm.
that. And I was just like, oh my God. No, and it was literally like the majority of people. I'm hoping that it's changed, 20 years on, but who knows? And it was very eye opening. And for the first time, I did feel, oh, okay, I don't fit in here.
Mm. Mm.
Even though I got on with people on a friendly level, but actually operating in that environment, like having all of the small talk that you have with the managers, and the way I would see them talking about rugby or cricket, or talking about, the skiing holidays, all of the things that they would talk about and small talk about,
Mm. You got to
I
become a
didn't relate
chameleon.
to it. I just didn't relate to
Yeah.
it. And then to your point, Lola, you do start to think, God, okay, is what I have to say even important or even interesting to all of these people that do all of these things? And I think even as at the senior levels, you're kind of faced with that again, because it continues. Like, the boardroom chat is always rugby this, cricket that, skiing holiday this, and it's great. I'm not saying that they shouldn't talk about that, but I am who I am, and that is not me, and that's not my background. I don't play
Mm,
golf, I don't watch rugby, I don't watch cricket. That's just not what I'm interested in. But
mm.
it's harder to see yourself and be comfortable, like really comfortable, not just putting on your mask and getting through those moments, but actually feel comfortable. That's for me where imposter syndrome definitely plays a part, because I just can't,
Yeah,
even though I know, and if I want to get to those places, I will get to those
Yeah,
places.
yeah,
But
yeah.
will I get there feeling comfortable and being myself completely? Probably not.
it's almost like a bridge, isn't it? Because you're having to cross this bridge
Yeah.
and build this bridge between you and the people in the boardroom that you just described.
Mm,
And you've got to work a lot harder. I see this all the time. I have to work a lot harder in building
Yeah.
relationships
You have
because
to put a
I'm
lot of effort into it.
very different. And
Yeah.
actually, I like the cricket and
mm.
I can
Yeah,
talk about
you've
the
got that
And
football.
you
one.
like
You've got
I
that
got that
football,
one.
one
yeah?
sorted. But it doesn't, it still makes it, it's still hard. It's still hard to
Yeah.
find that common
The
ground when
common
you're
ground.
the
Yeah.
only one that looks like you or comes from that sort of background. So
Mm.
it's yeah, I think that's going to be I don't think that goes away. It's funny because I'm still doing that now.
Yeah.
Almost 20 years into a career.
Yeah. Yeah.
But maybe it is more of a diversity and inclusion topic. It's one thing to hire diverse talent, but do you understand the responsibility that that requires of you as an
Yeah.
employer and as a manager? You can't just hire people without understanding what that means. Like, you've got to be there to support them as they navigate the environment. And you've got to know that's where that inclusion piece comes in.
You've got to build culture. You can't just bring diverse people to build a team or a diverse team because it doesn't work unless the culture changes.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I was just thinking as you were talking about, again, I'm using the boardroom situation as an example just because we've been talking about it. Actually, in reality, is it the fault of people in that boardroom that they're talking about rugby and cricket or whatever it is? That those are their hobbies. It's something that they like doing. The problem there is you just don't have anyone else that's diverse on the board. And I'm talking hypothetically here, to have other conversations with. So, it's dominated by a certain type of person that likes those sorts of things. But if you had a diverse set of people, you'd feel like you maybe not so much of an outsider, I guess.
I agree, but I also think there's diverse types, right? You're talking about
Mm,
diversity, you're also talking about personality types. And even if you're a white male, let's say, from a particular background, and you're more seen in those situations, you can also take responsibility to try and draw people in. And I
yeah.
have an example. I was out at a lunch, try and be general here, with some colleagues,
King
and
Charles? Oh.
yeah, with King Charles, my friend. um, but it also included some, of our board members, and you go into those situations thinking, okay, let's get it on. Let's get in the frame of mind to have the conversations, and to get your mind. You're going to have to small talk. You're going to have conversations,
Mm.
this and that. You almost have to. I do anyway. I have to mentally prepare myself for those situations. And the chat was going, as expected. People talking about the normal topics that we've spoken about. But one of them, he drew me into the conversation. He was asking me specifically about an experience that I'd had, and he didn't just ask me about it and left it. We had a conversation about this particular time in my life and what I'd been through, and I came out of that, and it lasted for, let's say, 5 minutes, and then we went back onto other conversations. But I came away from that, number one, seeing that person in a really different light, thinking, oh my god, like, you really wanted to hear from me, and we had a really good conversation, that you got to know me. You actually got to know a little bit more about me. And it was me in my full authentic self. I was talking to you about my background and about time that I'd spent abroad. I just came away feeling, God, that's such a different experience to what I've had. It wasn't because there were any other diverse people at the table. It was just because somebody took it upon themselves to draw me in.
Yeah.
And I think that's where we miss the mark, because the responsibility is always on women to lead diversity and
Yeah.
inclusion. It's always on Black or Asian people to lead diversity and inclusion. Actually,
I
it
can't
needs to
include
be led.
myself.
You can't
Right.
include.
Like, if I'm already not inside,
I can't
how
draw
do I
myself
include
in.
myself?
It's got to be led by people that we see in senior positions. They've got to buy
Yeah.
into it. It
That's
needs to
so
be
true.
sincere. And that's, I think, where we don't see that a
And
lot.
he listened and he was genuinely
Yeah.
interested.
Yeah. And it makes such a difference. It's something so simple.
Did you feel seen?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, I felt like, God, honestly, I really took away from that feeling, I really have a lot of respect for you. you
Hmm.
you actually drew me into that conversation, and not everybody knows how to do that. And maybe we
Or
should be
cares
teaching
to.
everybody how to do it, or people
Yeah.
care to do it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it gives you, it just makes you feel more like you can be in those situations, you can sit in those environments, and what you've been through, not been through, what you've experienced, your life experience has value as much as, somebody that went to Eton. Like, I think Britain is a very classist country, so class is a major factor in all of this, really.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I've even come across a senior manager recently who he makes it his business to like advocate for people, and he makes it his business to let you know you're freaking good at what you do. You're really,
Yeah.
really valued.
Yeah, it's so important.
But that is very rare. Like
Very
I
rare.
haven't come across managers, even the nicest,
Yeah.
who proactively compliment and try to boost and develop and grow you. That it's just, and he's from a privileged background, but he cares about people. You've got to
Exactly.
care about people
Yeah.
fundamentally.
Yeah.
You can't teach that.
Yeah, exactly. But meanwhile, people are being promoted and made managers, not considering that, right? And this is
Yes.
what, again, impacts culture. Those people that you put in senior leadership positions, they are the ones that show everyone the way. And there's only so much you can do from down here, right? So that really does make a difference. But is there anything that we can do ourselves, that we can take responsibility for, or that we can do personally to combat the feeling of imposter syndrome?
That's a really tough question.
I think acknowledging it is
Yeah.
important, so that you can differentiate between actually feeling like you can't do your job, or you're not supposed to be there, and the imposter side of it, which is more feeding into it a bit. Like, it's not a lie, but it's kind of like, you always need to separate it and say, there's an external reason why I feel like I feel. Like, it's not because I am actually not good, or it's not because I'm actually not supposed to be there. It's because external factors make me feel like this. So that kind of, I don't know, because I feel like otherwise, well, for me, you can start to spiral a bit and hold yourself back, because you can't separate it. You kind of take it on as, no, I feel like this because I must just not be where I should be, and it must, it's almost like acknowledging that it is a lot to do with external factors, but how to, Marla, you help us out here. How to actually deal with it is hard.
I think we internalize things a lot. So, this is a good thing to do anyway, but why don't we go out, get feedback from people that we work with?
That's important.
And it doesn't have to be positive feedback, but getting that constructive feedback too, but not just from your manager on your half year review or your full year review, but through people that you're generally interacting with on a day-to-day basis, because that will help. I'm saying this, but I'm not telling you that I'm doing this, so perhaps That's not so good. But I think a lot of it is internalized. So let's get that external feedback and then
Mm.
let's do what we normally do, which is analyze and digest. And but it just adds another layer there.
Yeah. When something is out of your control, you start to put it on you. And I think we've touched on this in different ways that, okay, how do I fix it? What can I do to make it right? Actually, that is way too much pressure to put on yourself. You're only in control of so many things. What we're then beginning to do is carry the weight of others. Even just having this kind of open conversation here today is eye opening too. Yeah, we don't want to make this a mountain. We don't want to make this a monster. We don't want to make this bigger than it is. But I think even breaking this down is very important because we've been digesting this and somewhat, thinking of this as perhaps us not being capable or not having the capacity or not being able to cope in some way. And actually, sometimes it's not you. Sometimes it's stuff that's got absolutely nothing to do with you. And I think we're probably doing what a lot of women do, which is just take everything on and try to fix it. And it's not ours to fix. So I'm even struggling to answer that question. I just think we just need to take care of ourselves,
Yeah.
take care of ourselves and
Yeah.
make sure that we're speaking positively to ourselves and to each other, that we're lifting each other up because we don't get it enough externally, which is part of the issue. It's friendships like this or conversations like this that help people actually see what the reality is outside of the dimension of work. So I think this conversation is how we combat it. Yeah. I don't know how else. I think other people have a lot of work to do.
It's true. It's kind of we can do what we can do in our areas of influence within the teams that we manage and how we talk to ourselves internally.
And not forgetting we bring something to the table that
Well,
others don't.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Acknowledging all the great things that you bring, not hold yourself back, push yourself forward, but also acknowledge that if you're in a space where you don't think you can thrive, then also don't be scared to move on as well. Like there's a balance. You can't fight all battles.
Yeah.
You've got to keep your own mental state in a good state as well.
Let's say you have someone who's just leaving university. She's about to start her new job. She's been having fun. Everybody's great. Everyone sees me. Everybody's equal. La di da di da. Now she's maybe a month into her first job and she's seeing a different side of things. What would you say to her today?
Good luck. You've got another 30 years to go. Yeah, there were. I mean, look, all the normal things like work ethic and focus, yeah, all of that. But build that network as well because
Yes.
having a strong network around you and when you're beginning I didn't do this. I didn't really
Mm, mm,
value having a network, but actually building a network around you with people from all walks of life, not just
Yes.
people that you would naturally move towards. Yeah. Having people to bounce ideas off, talk about situations, having that circle around you and people that you can call on in any situation, I think would be a good support.
Yeah.
Don't undervalue it.
And I would also just throw in there, don't lose yourself. A lot of people go in to work and go into their career thinking they have to be one way or one person, but you can only keep that up for so long and you will end up unhappy. So don't lose yourself. Try to hold on to your values and what you believe is right. And just stay focused, try not to get distracted. You're going to see a lot of shit going on around you. Just stay laser focused. Don't let anything stop you or pull you back. That's what I would say.
Every experience is a good experience. Even the bad experiences are good experiences. Maybe not at the time, but you look back on it and you just think that was awful, but this is what I learned. So
Yeah.
and back yourself. Back yourself. Don't write yourself out. if it's uncomfortable, don't move to the side, like back yourself, and don't be afraid to, although I think the young ones these days don't need this advice, but don't be afraid to move on.
Yeah, they're
If you're
moving on
not,
after 2 months, aren't they?
yeah, exactly. I was going to say they don't need that advice.
Yeah, try to hold out a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just hold on a little bit. Double it.
Oh God.
Millennial jokes.
And pay attention to culture.
Oh, yeah.
Pay attention to culture as much as you can. It's hard, but when you're deciding where to go, just be alert to culture, because that's actually the most important aspect of whether you enjoy your job or not.
It is, but did any of us really put that in our top 3 when we were looking at roles when we came out of university?
No, it wasn't even a
job.
concept.
Wasn't even,
Yeah.
Yeah.
not at all.
Thank you, Marla and Kemi, for joining us today on A Human Perspective. Really enjoyed this in-depth conversation. It's got us all thinking. I think we've come into the conversation thinking about imposter syndrome one way, and we're walking out with a whole new view on the whole concept. But thank you both so much for being so open and joining me today.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lola.
Oh my God, I hope that actually made sense.
I mean, we could have gone anywhere for another hour.
I know.